Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar on Power BI. In this session, we'll be discussing about various concepts of business intelligence. We'll also understand why to use Power BI when we already have MSBI. And let me tell you, this session will also include a lot of practicals and examples of Power BI. Among our participants here, that is you, we have a well-rounded representation across different geographies, including India, USA, UK, Singapore, Middle East. We have Sain Day, who will be taking us through the session. He has a rich experience with BI and has worked on multiple tools in BI domain. I welcome you, Sain. Over to you now.
Hi all, wishing you a very good morning, good evening and good afternoon to all of you joining in from across the world. I hope you can all hear me loud and clear. I'm just going ahead and sharing my screen at this moment. Get to hear nowadays data science, all of this has to do with BI. So it's a very broad domain which kind of covers all the related technologies. So I'd really like to understand from the whole class, just to set expectations up front. We are going to discuss Power BI and we are going to initially start off with broad concepts of BI. At a very high level, I'm going to go ahead and show you what the overall overview of a BI project is, right? We hear terms called ETL. And please understand these are tool agnostic. Now, many of you would have worked in different BI tools like you have MSBI, Microsoft BI, you have Tableau, you have Informatica, you have Ab Initio, there's so many BI tools out of the market. And obviously in the visualization standpoint, you have Tableau, Spotfire, Power BI of course, and you have ClickView. So there's so many BI tools out there in the market, but the broad concepts remain the same. ETL, then we do reporting, data warehouse, the fundamentals of a data warehouse, these concepts remain the same, right? So the idea is to first take you through some of these basic concepts and then eventually go ahead and get deep into Power BI, really to show you the capabilities of Power BI and how Power BI can make business intelligence very, very easy. Because the whole point of BI up to this point, and this is, we're at an intersection of traditional BI and modern BI. The Power BI is more into the realm of modern BI, advanced BI, where we are in a self-service BI, the way we like to call it, okay? But then we have made a great move from the world of traditional BI. And traditional BI, where you use tools like SQL Server Integration Services, SSIS, MSBI that we call it, Informatica, Cognos. So these kind of softwares are difficult to use, right? I mean, you invariably have to invest a lot of money, you have to recruit software engineers, and invariably what it means is that the next time when the CEO of an organization wants a report, when the CEO of an organization wants to report how they performed over the past 10 years, they cannot build that report because Cognos or SSRS, these reporting tools are difficult to use. You know, it's difficult to develop reports there. So it is not meant for end users. And this is where a revolution has happened around visualization and BI in general, where tools like Alteryx, Power BI, ClickView, Tableau, these kind of tools have really taken the market by storm. And which is where we are slowly getting into the realm of self-service BI, right? Which is, and the meaning of self-service BI basically means you're putting BI in the hands of the end users. So the next time the management wants to build a report, they don't have to wait for the IT team to get involved. They'll just open up the tool and they'll just build a report from scratch. They just build it themselves. So that's where we're at a very, very interesting junction right now, where BI is so easy and it is so readily available in the hands of literally everyone, and which is the reason why so many of you from different backgrounds, you may be freshers, you may have worked in the organization, a different technology, but I mean, it's just amazing to see the curiosity around BI in general. And as I mentioned, that a lot of these terms that we see being thrown around, machine learning, analytics, data science, are predictive analytics, all of this is part of the wider BI canvas. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and quickly take you through a section where I briefly talk about the MSBI, a very basic overview of what is BI and in general the BI architecture. Okay, so all of us have an understanding of what is a data warehouse, right? And I just wanted to bring this up just to give you an understanding of how traditional BI works. And let's just take an example of MSBI in general. MSBI stands for Microsoft BI. Okay, so how it typically works is, and if I quickly bring this up, so this is how traditional BI used to work. Okay, so let's say your organization ABC, and ABC is the company, and essentially, so you have stores around the world, and you're a pharmaceutical company. Let's say you have retail stores across the world where you sell your medicines. Okay, so you have data that is being generated. So 1, 2, 3, 4, these are all the retail stores, and this is the company ABC, right? And company ABC, basically a pharmaceutical company, and these are the retail outlets where its medicines, the medicines that ABC generates, ABC produces, are sold. So each of these retail stores will generate their own data, right? So retail store 1 will have its own data as to, at the end of the day, how much of sales were made. Retail store 2 will have its own data. Okay, at the end of the day, how much of sales were made, so that kind of stuff. Okay, so The idea is that you have these pockets of data. You have these pockets of data from different places. You can have hundreds of thousands of retail stores across the world, and you can think of the enormity of the challenge, right? You can think of the enormity of the challenge as in how are you going to do any analysis on that data, right? Tomorrow, if the company, if the management of ABC wants to know how have we performed, what has been our total sales over the past 1 year, you can imagine how it has to pull in that data from all these different sources. These are the sources, all these different sources, it has to pull in that data and then finally do a reporting to its management, right? You can use any kind of reporting tool, and you know, when I say reporting from now on, reporting can be done even using the simplest of tools like Excel. Okay, by the way, not taking anything away from Excel, and I'll slowly get into Power BI and I'll say how Power BI has gradually evolved from Excel. Excel, by the way, has very powerful reporting capabilities. Okay, so for some of you who have not explored it, you have some really cool things you can do in Excel in terms of Power View and Power Map. We'll talk more about those kind of things when we get into Power BI as such. But then this is the broad picture, right? You essentially, this is where you're bringing in data from multiple sources, and this is the part which we call extraction. You're extracting that data from multiple different sources and you're loading that data into the company ABC servers. Okay, so this is the part which we call a data warehouse. Okay, and just to give you a more granular picture of what we are doing, these are all my different sources. So these are all the retail outlets that I have, and these are all the different sources I have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're doing the ETL part. ETL, the E stands for extraction, the T stands for transformation, and the L stands for loading. Okay, so this is the ETL that you're doing, right? You're extracting your data, you're transforming your data, and then you're finally loading that data into a central data warehouse. Okay, why do you need that? Because now the data is readily available with ABC to do its reporting. If you have not done the ETL, you can just imagine what challenges you will be facing. So you will have some data, let's say company retail store AB, retail store 1 stores its data in an Excel file. It's a very small shop. It can be a very small shop which they don't invest much in softwares or databases, and all they have is an Excel file. They just have Microsoft Office, and they'll just store their data. At the end of every day, they'll record their sales in an Excel file. Okay, it's a very simple method of saving data. Let's say retail outlet 2 has its data stored in SQL Server. Retail outlet 3 has an Oracle. Retail outlet 4 has an DB2, and so on and so forth. Retail outlet 5 might have some of its data stored in some flat files. Okay, so there's so many different kinds of sources are there. Then we call it heterogeneous sources. The different kinds of sources of data that you have, and you're trying to pull in all those different sources. You're trying to extract the data. You're trying to do some transformation, and then you're trying to load the data into a common format into a SQL Server data warehouse. I'm taking SQL Server because I'm just giving an example of MSBI, but I mean it can be anything. That data warehouse, that database. It could be a SQL Server. It could be an Oracle. It could literally be anything. Okay, and finally you're doing reporting on top of it. So you're using Excel, you're using SSRS, using Power BI, you can use ClickView, you can use Tableau, and finally you're doing reporting on top of it. So that's the broad picture. I don't want to get too much into the other stuff right now, but I just wanted to give you a broad picture as what ETL is. Where does the broad BI story unfold? So this is how BI works in a broad way. So you do ETL, right? This is the extract, transform, load, and SSIS is one such tool, right? This is, we call it SQL Server Integration Services. Okay, we use a Visual Studio shell to develop an integration services solution. Similar other ETL tools are, people would have worked in Ab Initio. Okay, Ab Initio is an ETL tool, a very expensive tool, by the way. Informatica is an ETL tool. Okay, so you have a lot of different such ETL tools out in the market, right? So you do that ETL, and ETL is primarily used to do that kind of you're trying to merge that data, and you're trying to bring it in one common format. So transformation is a very important part of ETL. So E is the extraction, T is the transformation, and L is the load. And the objective is basically to take all that data from different sources, apply some common business rules in the transformations, and finally load that stuff into a common platform, which could be a SQL Server, it could be an Excel, it could be literally anything. But the idea is to bring it in one common platform instead of having them in heterogeneous sources. And finally, once you have them in one common platform, it's very easy to do reporting. And now the company's management can connect to that data warehouse, and they can do reporting. They can easily find out how they have performed over the past 1 year. We call it the single version of truth, right? So there are a lot of different terminologies that go with data warehouses. Again, I won't get too much into the details of it, but then this is what we call the single version of truth. So anything and everything that has to do with company ABC is there in this data warehouse. So people will not go back to any other kind of source. Everything resides in that data warehouse. So all reporting happens from this data warehouse. That's the ideal picture, right? That's traditional BI. So what I'm explaining to you is traditional BI. This is another image that I wanted to bring up, and in general, this is what we have. You have the sources, you're doing the ETL, and you're loading the data into a warehouse. And in traditional BI, you also have a concept of cubing, okay, and finally you are you're doing reporting from that particular data. All right, so that's a very broad overview of BI in general that I wanted to talk about, and just to quickly talk a little bit about some of the value addition that BI brings to the table. So one of the things that you have is obviously you have boosting productivity. So it's great for productivity, as in, I mean, just example that I showed you, you're having all that data at the tip of the fingertips of your management, right? So the management wants to know that, hey, how did I perform over the last 10 years? So you have a ready-made place, you have a ready-made storehouse where that data is stored, and now you can easily connect that to a reporting tool, and you can do visualization from that. And just to also relate it to a bit of practical right now, and even before I get into Power BI, per se, just to get into a little bit of practical and just to show you how this actually works, I'll quickly open up my SQL Server Management Studio, and let me show you something cool here. I'll open up my SQL Server Management Studio, and what I'm going to show you is I have an AdventureWorks data warehouse loaded there, and I'm going to try to connect Excel to that AdventureWorks, and I'm going to show you how quickly you can do reporting simply by using Excel. And that's also BI, right? That's also BI. And at the end of the day, you are doing something. You built a database or a data warehouse, whatever you want to call it. Okay, that's another discussion, by the way. OLTP, OLAP, where you have online transaction processing, online analytical processing. So you're storing that data, and now you're leveraging your data. You're doing reporting on your data. Okay, so I'm going to quickly go ahead and connect to my SQL Server just to show you that AdventureWorks data warehouse that I have here right now, connected to my local instance of SQL Server. I go to my database. You might be wondering, okay, all this while I'm talking about a data warehouse, how did I come into a database? Now, please understand, friends, and I think this is where a lot of people get confused. A data warehouse is a database. Okay, so one of the things I like to say here is all data warehouses are eventually databases. Okay, all data warehouses are eventually databases. All databases may not be data warehouses, right? Because the platform that we are right now, it's SQL Server, that's an RDBMS, right? It's an RDBMS, isn't it? There's so many other kinds of RDBMS products out there. There's DB2, there's Oracle. So in RDBMS, everything is a database, right? It's a storehouse of data. Now, data warehouse is a special kind of database, right? So that's a very different discussion where, there's a very different kind of modeling that happens in databases. We typically have the concept of normalization where, you have 1NF, 2NF, 3NF. We rigorously stick to the ER model, the entity relationship model. Whereas in data warehouses, you're really going into the realms of what we call dimensional modeling. So when you open a data warehouse, you still have tables. There's no rocket science here. It's nothing alien here. You still have tables, just the same way that you find in databases. You can still right-click. You can still do a select top 1000. You can still write queries, and these are going to be transact SQL queries because I'm using SQL Server, of course. Okay, you can still write queries, but the idea is that this is the data warehouse, and you can see, very interesting. You can see these are dim facts. Can you see the dims, facts, and stuff like that? Yep, this is where the modeling is done very, very differently. Okay, that's dim fact. All right, so guys, I understand this might sound a little bit esoteric for some of you. Again, my apologies if I'm going a little too fast, but then again, this is just to give you guys a background. By no means is it something that we can, cover in a day's time or even an hour's time, but I just wanted to give you a big picture, a very big picture overview of BI in general, data warehouse in general, just to show you what a data warehouse looks like, just to show you how data warehouse is different from a database at a very high level, and then finally connect it to Power BI and how Power BI has improved and what all capabilities Power BI has, right? So don't try to get too deep into the concepts of data warehousing. It's a completely different discussion. It's a course in itself. Okay, so let's not get too much into that, but the idea behind opening up SQL Server is just to show you that this is the stuff that you have out here, right? And what I'm going to show you now is how you can open up Excel and how we can connect to this data warehouse and how we can generate simple reports, right? So the point that we have mentioned here, boosting productivity. So this is exactly what we are trying to do here. So I can open up a simple Excel workbook. You can go to data, you can go to from other sources, you can connect to your local instance of SQL Server, and you can see how easy it is to do reporting. Okay, I'll select Windows Authentication, I'll select my AdventureWorks data warehouse. Okay, so you can select multiple tables. You can say enable selection of multiple tables. So probably I want to select my, let's say I want to select my DIM product, and I want to also go ahead and select my factor internet sales. Click on next, click on finish. This will be created a new workbook, and essentially it's going to be like a pivot chart that I'm going to have. or you can simply create a pivot table, whichever way you want to do it. And now you can see I've connected this data from my AdventureWorks data warehouse. So the idea is that you've done your ETL, you've stored that data in your data warehouse, and now you're doing reporting on it. And here I'm just giving an example where I'm using Excel to do that reporting. The same reporting can also be performed by using tools like Tableau. You can connect Spotfire to that data warehouse, and you can also connect Power BI to that data warehouse. Okay, but ultimately, what I really wanted to drive here is that ultimately what you're doing is you're adding value to the business by better visualization of the data. So A, you're storing your data properly, and B, you're doing good reporting, proper reporting on your data. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take sales amount. If you want to analyze your sales based on color, you can see that it's so simple to do. So now all of a sudden you see, okay, these are different colored products, and this is how my total sales has worked out across different colors. Obviously, you can go ahead and build charts, different kinds of charts on this data. This is a pivot table. You can probably put one more category for size, and now you can see that I've broken them out into rows and columns. All right, so this is again BI, right? Because it's boosting productivity. So as a manager, as the management of the company, and what I really wanted to drive here, and the reason why I wanted to show you the Excel is because this is difficult, right? I mean, you can't expect the management of the company to open up SQL Server and go ahead and write a query, or for that matter, even open up a difficult reporting tool like SQL Server Reporting Services or even Cognos, and essentially go back and write a report there, develop a report there. It's not feasible, right? And this is where tools like, and that's traditional BI, right? And that's traditional BI. Traditional BI is where you have to actually go ahead and do coding. There are instances where you have to actually literally go ahead and do coding. The realm of Excel and what we have done here is what we call self-service BI. Okay, this is what we call self-service BI, where it's so easy to connect to your data, and it's so easy for the end user to generate visualizations the way they want. Okay, so that's what we really mean by self-service BI, and that was basically the objective of me to show you this kind of stuff here. So going back to the slides again, obviously to gain sales and market intelligence goes without saying, helps in winning customers. I mean, obviously, if you have good hold of your data, I mean, if you can relate to the example of the pharmaceutical company ABC, which has retail stores across the world. I mean, if it has a hang of how it is performing, you know, real-time data points of where its sales are coming from, which stores are performing the best, it knows where to invest its money on. So if it knows retail store 2 is not performing well, it knows that the next time it invests, the retail store 2 is going to be its target. So next marketing budget, a major chunk of its marketing budget will go towards retail store 2. So it does help a lot in terms of in this kind of analytics. So the whole idea again is a sort of broad picture through all these decks is what we are trying to achieve is that a BI in general is something that you're building. You're building a complete solution, an ETL solution plus a reporting solution to add value to your business and for the management to make better decisions. And that's where it all ends. So you're ultimately helping your management make better decisions through a proper extraction of data, proper storage of data, and proper visualization of data, right? And in needless to say, the ROI, if we look at point number 5, needless to say, the ROI is very, very high here. And especially in today's world of self-service BI, traditional BI was different. Traditional BI was where, as I told you, you needed people with IT skills, you know, you needed people with skills, you know, people had to understand coding, Visual Studio. But in the self-service BI world, with tools like Power BI coming into the market, anyone can get into this, right? Anyone can build a quick dashboard. So some basic analytical skills, you can start building some really cool graphics from scratch and literally in minutes, right? Literally in minutes. You can open up an Excel file and you can literally develop charts, maps in minutes. I should actually say seconds, and I'll show you how it is in seconds. All right, so actionable information is a very, very important part, and this is the reason where I say better decision making. Ultimately, BI is something that really enables business to make better decisions, and which is where the term actionable information is put in. So you have data, you have a huge amount of data, but nothing is useful. None of the data is useful if you cannot use it, right? So you have to convert that data into actionable information based on which the business can make decisions. So any information based on which you can make decisions is actionable information, right? And that's where BI is really, really helpful. Now, coming to Power BI, just to take a quick leap into Power BI and just to make a gradual into Power BI. Power BI, first thing is self-service BI. Okay, one of the best things about Power BI is the IT involvement. So previously how it used to work is, as I initially mentioned, if the business has to build a report, it has to involve the IT team, it has to raise a request, the IT team will do its own requirements gathering. It has, again, in the typical waterfall model, you will go ahead and prepare a report specification document. today's agile model, things are different, but then again, there is a lot of IT involvement where, there'll be requirements gathering, you have to build a replica, you have to run it through the users. So it's a very cumbersome process. I mean, put yourself in the shoes of a business owner and just think about it. If you want something delivered right away, you will not get it because the IT team will, they will have they have their own constraints, they will have their own priorities, and they will have their own development effort, right? So, and this is where Power BI and tools like Power BI really make BI accessible to the end users, and which is why I use the term self-service BI. Okay, it's about making BI accessible to the end users. Just to resume our discussion here, as I was mentioning, machine learning is a big component of Power BI, and again, initially when I started off, I mentioned that machine learning, data science, these are all components. These are all the broader canvas of BI. If you take the broader canvas of BI technologies, all of it is a part of BI, and machine learning is a big part of Power BI because it makes machine learning accessible to end users. So all this while, we hear the term R, whenever we have to do machine learning, we use tools like R and Python, where you have to do complex coding, you have to know about packages, but then machine learning becomes so much accessible in Power BI. And I won't exactly show you, but I'll at least give you a basic flavor of I'll at least give you a basic flavor of how you can do that kind of stuff when I get into the demos of Power BI. All right, so guys, just to take a quick pause right now, I've been getting a few questions at this moment. I will take up a few of your questions. We're going to have a logical break in some time, okay? We have a lot of questions that are coming in. I'll try to take your questions one by one. So Andrew, just to take your question, we are going to see how we can get this slide across to you. All right, so I'm going to come back to you on that. We're going to send you an email to all of you, have your email IDs. So we're going to send across an email to all of you and try to understand how we can share particular deck. All right, so I'm going to come back to you on that. So Krishna had a question, difference between BI. I don't really have the full question from you, Krishna. You want to understand Tableau? Is that what you're trying to understand? I mean, Power BI and Tableau, right? So Power BI and Tableau, they're both very, very powerful tools. I'm not sure how many of you follow the Gartner survey, but Power BI is yet to catch up. Nothing against Power BI, but Power BI is a very powerful tool. It's a very capable tool, but Tableau is clearly the market leader when it comes to BI. There are no second thoughts about it. Power BI is very close to catching up, but then there are capabilities that Tableau has, which no BI tool in the market has today. Of course, ClickSense is a tool which is, at a par, I will say, as per Gartner survey, but Power BI is catching up very, very fast, very, very fast. Okay, and when I talk about Power BI, and again, this is something that gradually we're going to talk about in the slides also. When you talk about Power BI, and it's not something that happened all of a sudden. Okay, you have to understand that Power BI has been there for a long time, and you'll be surprised to know how. You'll be surprised to know how Power BI has been there for a long time, because it's only recently that we get to hear about Power BI, right? You'll be surprised to know that Power BI was there for a long time. How come we did not have a course on Power BI? The reason is because no one knew about it. I'm sure how you would have heard the terms Power Query, Power Pivot, Power View, and Power Map. I'm sure if you have used Excel, or even if you have not used Excel, you might have at least heard these terms, right? If you open up Excel, it's a very simple add-in that you have. So how it is to work is in Excel, Power Query, Power Pivot, Power Views, these are all add-ins. If I go ahead and open my Excel to you, and again, I'm using an Excel 2013, which is advanced version, but actually it's a 2016. So if you see in my data pane, you have something called a new query. Okay, I have Power Pivot. So I have Power Pivots added in, but these are add-ins that I have. Okay, these are add-ins that I have that used to come in Excel. Okay, and whenever you have to build a Power BI solution, you had to go to Excel, you have to build your own query using Power Query. You have to build your own query, and then you go ahead and build a model. You build a model through which you establish relationships. Okay, so this is table A, this is table B, this is table C, and then you establish relationships. Okay, how are these tables related? That kind of stuff you do in Power Pivot. Power Pivot is where you define the relationships between the different tables. And finally, you come to Power View and Power Map, where you're representing that data. So these come as separate add-ins as part of Excel, and these are, I think, starting from 2010 version, it started being available to Excel users as add-ins. That's Power BI. That's where Power BI started. Okay, it is only very recently, I think in 2014 is when Power BI was launched, where Microsoft incorporated all these different add-ins. The historical way in which people used to build their solutions, Microsoft incorporated these add-ins into one product, which they called the Power BI desktop. I'll talk more about Power BI Desktop. I'll show you some demos of some cool stuff you can do. This is what I have the Power BI Desktop. I'll show you Power BI Desktop in a while, okay? But then this is what it is. It's no different. It's no different from what it was 5 years back, okay? Of course, there have been improvements. There have been improvements in the performance, but the underlying layer remains the same. It's still Power Query. It's still Power View. It's still Power Map and Power Pivot that makes up Power BI. Which one? Nothing but Excel add-ins. Right? So that's what I wanted to talk about in terms of the history of Power BI. And so Sunil, absolutely sort. Tableau is not BI; it is a reporting tool. I think it's a very good point. Even Power BI, you know, I did mention a few instances where I said Power BI, Tableau. These are all reporting tools. Absolutely. I think the more modern terminology that gets associated with them are visualization tools. Right, so we call them visualization tools. Reporting will be more from a very traditional BI standpoint, but you're absolutely bang on that these are reporting tools with very limited ETL capabilities. Okay, I talked about ETL, extract, transform, load, where you do a lot of transformations, a lot of data churning. That kind of capability is still very, very limited in Power BI and even Tableau. Tableau, still being the market leader, has very limited capabilities in terms of ETL, the specific turf transformations and data churning capabilities. Okay, and which is where there is still a huge amount of dependence on tools like Informatica and MSBI. MSBI is also hugely popular just for that ETL part. Just for this ETL part, I think it's still hugely popular. So just to perform this part, to bring your data, to do that ETL and to load it into a data warehouse, you still use tools like SSIS, Informatica, Ab Initio, and stuff like that. Once you have your data here, that's where the real power of, you know, Excel, Tableau, and all the reporting visualization tools come in. Okay. So not exactly that. I mean, again, Power BI will not exactly be very limited in capability. It's still very advanced. So a lot of stuff which you could not even have imagined you could have done, you can still perform. And as I'll show you, it has very, very good recommendation capability. So you can just, you know, take a data set and it will automatically tell you stories about your data, right? You can just upload a table, just tell Power BI, okay, here is my table, and Power BI will automatically generate visuals for you, which probably will be unimaginable even a couple of years back. And that's where the machine learning component really comes in, and that's where we were discussing about the machine learning slide. That's where the machine learning component really comes in. So it is able to predict, just by looking at your data, it is able to predict how your data should look like. We'll look at a few of those kind of demos also going forward in a while. Just trying to take up a few of your other questions here. All right, so Dana is a system administrator. So hi Dana, Power BI is your first BI interest. And I think we have a lot of folks who have picked up, and this is where the real power of self-service BI lies. You know, it really makes BI accessible to everyone. I mean, you may not be from a BI background. And the reason why I really started with traditional BI, it's not to really discourage you, but just to give you the broader picture. I wanted to also involve folks who have worked in BI. But for those who have not worked in BI, who have no understanding of BI, who don't understand what is a fact table, dimension table, it's absolutely fine. It's great to know it, but with basic analytical skills, you know, if you have a basic understanding of data, if you have a basic aesthetic sense of how to represent your data, I think you can make an amazing career out of data visualization in general, which is by the way a tremendously valuable skill in today's market. Okay, it's one thing to store your stuff here, where you can see, you know, it's an SSMS management studio, or you can open up Toad and Oracle, where you can interact with your data through SQL queries. But for the management, this makes no sense. You know, they hate this kind of stuff. What they like are cool charts, cool graphs, you know, give some maps, interactivity. That's the kind of language they speak. And those are skills anyone can pick up. And those are the kind of skills which are hugely in demand in today's market. So Sundeep, to answer your question, Power BI is for business analysts, not for a developer. Well, I'll try to take that a little differently. Power BI is something which is meant for all kinds of user groups. So it is definitely meant for business analysts. You're bang on there. You get your data points. You give your data. So a data analyst can look at that data, and they can basically, I mean, business analysts will have an understanding of how to present the data. Business analysts are people who have domain knowledge. They know how to best represent their data, right? So absolutely, business analysts are a primary user group, right? But even developers have a lot of value to add in Power BI, right? So how are developers involved? You have APIs where you can actually do custom coding. I'll show you. There's an R visual where you can actually do a lot of custom visualization. You can build custom visualizations. So indeed, it is a paradise for developers if you really have an interest to get deep into that aspect. So it's a tool which is basically literally for all kinds of user groups. Yep. So self-service BI does not really limit it to business analysts. All right, so moving back to the decks, and this is what I really meant by machine learning. I'm going to come back to this part when I show you the Power BI service and get into the demos exactly what kind of machine learning stuff you can do. But broadly, that's what it is. I mean, it's really suited for machine learning. You have all your data and using Power BI to connect to that data, and it makes machine learning easy. It's very easy to, and just to give you an example, just to give you a very simple example right now, you might have heard the term linear regression, okay? People who would have done data science, who would have studied data science before, or who would have worked in data science before, you might know linear regression. Yeah, it's very easy to do linear regression in R. Okay, you don't need to write any kind of code for that purpose. So all you do is build a line chart. So you have your trend for the past 5 years. So let's say you have sales values for the past 5 years, and you want to predict how will you perform in the next year. That is something which is a default feature in R. It's a default feature in Power BI where you just go there and you have a prediction tab where you can just go ahead and enable it, and that's it, linear regression done. So it shows you exactly how much you're going to sell in the next year. Again, it's predictive analytics, it's linear regression. There's a huge amount of mathematics that goes around it, so which is of course a different domain altogether. But then going by a simple linear regression where you're just trying to look at past 5 years data and trying to plot the next year by arriving at the y-intercept and the slope. I mean, that's something that Power BI gives to you by default. Okay, that's a very simple example of machine learning I wanted to take, but that's still an example of machine learning, right? Mobility, you have something called Power BI Mobile, where you build a dashboard in Power BI. So you have the Power BI desktop component where you build your dashboard. Okay, so this is the desktop component that I showed you. This is the desktop component where you build your dashboard and then you upload that dashboard. You can basically upload that dashboard to something we call a Power BI service, right? So just to take you through that architecture briefly, this is what we call the Power BI service. Right, so app.powerbi.com. So the way it works is when you folks try to access this link for the first time, you may not have Power BI service enabled because you have to create a user account. Okay, so how it's going to work is you have to create a user account for the very first time. I can go ahead and show this to you just in a while how it works, and just so that you guys can also practice, in your own time. It's really cool. I'll really encourage all of you to go ahead and spend some time here. You have to create a user account. You can see that when I go to powerbi.microsoft.com, it's basically changed. You can see app.powerbi.com, and now it's powerbi.microsoft.com. It takes you to the default link. Click on sign in, and when you try to sign in, it will ask you for your credentials, right? Or if you don't have it, then you can enter your work email address. So make sure, this is very important, you can only do it using your work email address. Okay, it will not allow you to enter a Gmail address or an Outlook or an Hotmail or an Yahoo. That won't allow. Okay, it has to be a work email address or an educational institution. If you're part of an educational institution, if you have a college ID, email ID, you can enter that. Okay, but Microsoft is very specific that they've made it accessible only for folks from organizations and folks from educational institutions, so you can use it for free. Okay, so note that Outlook, Gmail, all these are blocked, so you cannot enter those details here. Okay, so very easy. You can use it for free. It's a trial version. I think it's the trial is for 30 days. You can extend your trial. The free version will be there, but it's pretty easy to sign up. Okay, and once you do that, this is the space that you get. This is the Power BI service. We call it the Power BI service. This lives in the cloud. Okay, this lives in the cloud, the Azure cloud. And so what you do is you build your stuff here. That's a desktop. That's a client tool. You build your stuff here and you upload them to the service. Okay, that is basically the model of Power BI. And what you do from here is all the users are going to access your dashboards from here. So if I had to give you the quick picture again, that's your desktop, right? That's just your computer where you're developing the solution, right? That's your laptop where you're developing the solution. That's what we call the Power BI desktop. That's my Power BI desktop client tool. After you develop that report, you upload that onto the Power BI service. I'll probably give the indication of a cloud. That's a Power BI service that lives in the cloud, and it is from that service that your dashboard is accessible to all the end users. Okay, now those end users can view your dashboard in different ways. So they can either view your dashboard in a mobile device, or they can view your dashboard in a browser, or whichever way they want to, they can view it. But broadly, the idea is that you have the Power BI desktop and you have the Power BI service. These are two of the most important components of Power BI. Okay, and finally, you're making your dashboard accessible to end users through link, and now they can access that either through the Power BI mobile device or through a browser, whichever way they want to access it. Okay, it's kind of client server, you can think of it. So it's your client, that's your server. So its server is in the cloud. But then one very important point to remember is Power BI it's a cloud service. It is not on-premise. Okay, so people who would have coming from other kinds of reporting tools like SQL Server reporting services or Cognos, the first question that you might have is, okay, so is this on-premise? I mean, is this an on-premise setup? Answer is no, because this service, this service lives in the cloud. Okay, so it's a cloud service. That's another very, very important thing. Okay, so the software, the desktop is a client tool, but then the server, the stuff where the place where your reports are uploaded, that's still in the cloud. Okay, unlike other reporting tools like SSRS and Cognos, where you have a on-premise setup inside the organization. When I say on-premise, I mean to say, let's say your company ABC. Okay, so company ABC will buy its own hardware, they will invest in their own systems, and they will set up the server in their own company inside their own premises. That is what we call on-premise. Okay, so the company ABC will own their hardware, they'll basically own the entire setup. So unlike that, in Power BI, even if I am a big organization like a Google, if I want to leverage Power BI for Google's dashboards, I don't have the option to have an on-premise setup. I still have to upload my stuff in the Power BI service. Okay, and that has been one of the major limitations of Power BI in general, where it's still not on-premise, and it's something that's in the works, and it's still on the service. So a lot of data security folks, CIOs particularly, get very, very nervous where whenever concept of uploading your data onto the cloud comes up, because you can see that you're developing all your stuff here, but ultimately you're uploading all your stuff to the cloud. And whenever people talk about the cloud, there are always questions of data security that comes in. I mean, there's a lot of improvements around it, a lot of stuff you can do, and it's not exactly the data is insecure, but then there's still that mindset where Power BI has not been able to capture. So even Tableau, even ClickView, these have their own server setups. In a Tableau, you have the Tableau server version, you have the Tableau online version, but you still have the Tableau server version. It still has the on-premise version, but Power BI does not have it. Power BI is completely a cloud service. That's another very, very important distinction between some of the other advanced visualization tools and Power BI, where lags in the race. It is still a cloud service, and people don't like the cloud. Okay, people like you and me, we love the cloud because it's easy for us, right? If we have to do some development, just go up to the cloud, put some stuff together, put it up there, show someone, and that's it. Your work is done. But for an organization, I mean, the cloud, that's not the way to work, right? You need a dedicated service. You need to control security. You need to own everything, but that's not the case in the cloud service, right? So you don't own the cloud. Microsoft owns the cloud, right? And Microsoft has access to your data, and that really makes people nervous. All right, so that's a very broad overview of the very basic component of Power BI, the Power BI desktop and the Power BI service. So to answer your question, Vamshi, absolutely you can. So Vamshi's question is, so are the dashboards accessible only through the cloud? So that is, you need web access. Well, yes and no. So I mean, again, I'll just quickly show you a few demos where accessible to the cloud, absolutely yes. So you can upload your dashboards here, and you can share the links with other users, and they can obviously access that through the web. Okay, and as I said, it could be either consumed through the browser, or you have something called Power BI Mobile. So once you go to the the Power BI service, once you have the service up, and you have to create the account just the way I showed you a while back, you can click on this downloads button, and you can get your Power BI desktop from here. So these are all free downloads. Once you have the service up, you can basically download these stuff for free. So just to briefly talk about a few of these components. So one is, of course, you have the Power BI desktop, which is the client tool. Data gateway is basically used for refreshes, scheduled refreshes. So let's say you're connecting to an on-premise SQL server. Okay, so Power BI, one of the great features of Power BI is it can be used to connect to a whole variety of sources. Okay, if I were to just go ahead and quickly show you what kind of sources you can connect to. So I'll just give you a demo in a while, but then it can connect to a lot of different sources. Sources can be on-premise, they can be SaaS sources, they can be Azure cloud, so different kinds of sources. Any kind of source you can imagine, Power BI can connect to it. That's one of the real benefits of Power BI. Okay, and data gateway is basically used for scheduled refreshes. Okay, so if you are connecting to a cloud source, if you're connecting to any kind of source which lives in the cloud, it could be a SaaS source, an Azure, whatever cloud source you have, you don't need a gateway. You can still schedule a refresh, and that refresh will happen without you installing any additional components. But then, especially if you're trying to connect to an on-premise setup, and when I say on-premise, let's say if you're trying to connect to a local instance of SQL Server or an Oracle database, in those kind of scenarios, you need a data gateway to schedule your refreshes. So what do I mean by schedule refreshes? So your dashboard lives in the cloud, right? You have uploaded your reports here, so everything lives in the cloud. And now tomorrow your data has changed, but you want your reports to refresh automatically. So that is what a scheduled refresh is all about. Okay, make sense? So you want your data here to refresh automatically, or to be in sync with your original database. That's what a data gateway is used for. Power BI for mobile, again, as I said, if you want to be on a mobile device, you can download it here. Power BI Publisher for Excel is a very close integration between Excel and Power BI. Okay, you can actually go ahead and insert your I don't have the component I don't have the component installed here, but if you have the component installed, you will see an option here when you build something, when you build some reports, you will see an option where you see publish to Power BI. So this is basically what it means. So you can directly upload Power BI to Power BI from Excel, and which is where Microsoft is trying to really close the gap, between Power BI and Excel. So for instance, I mean, you can bring Excel dashboards to Power BI and Power BI dashboards to Excel, and eventually the big picture will be to make them one of the same product. Okay, that's some of the things that I wanted to talk about at a very high level. The decks are really things that we have mostly covered. I'm still going to go ahead and talk through it. Anything additional stuff is there. So obviously the lower upfront cost, and one of the reasons why we say lower upfront cost is because you're not really investing in a complete setup, right? All that you're paying for is a very nominal fee per month, okay? Because you're just using the service on the cloud. You're not really paying anything for the additional software. So and the reason is because it's a cloud service, okay? It's a cloud service. You're not really paying anything for the server. You don't have to invest money in a complete server box and invest money in a management team, invest money in an administrator team to take care of your server. The upfront costs are lower because the server is with Microsoft. Microsoft maintains the Azure, the cloud, and you don't have to pay anything for that. So all you pay for is that you pay a very nominal fee. I think the fee right now, it stands at $9 per user per month. I think $9.99 per user per month. That's all you pay for getting a full license on the cloud. So can Power BI connect to Redshift? Absolutely, yes, it can. And I'm going to just give you a brief idea in a while what the capabilities and what kind of stuff you can connect to. APIs for integration, I touched upon this, customization, and user-friendly, very, very user-friendly indeed. One thing I did want to cover here, thing on Cortana integration. It's a very, very, very nice, neat feature that you have in Power BI. In case you're wondering what is Cortana, Cortana is very similar to Google Now and Apple Siri. I'm sure you guys will be familiar. There's a personal assistant, right? And Cortana is Microsoft's personal assistant, right? Windows 10, you get it in Windows 10 by default. So it has a very close integration with Power BI. So you can directly from within Cortana, you can query stuff like, okay, what was the sales for the past 10 days? I mean, it can literally very, very cool stuff you can do with Cortana there. Job trends, I already talked about the future of Power BI is very, very bright right now, especially it has picked up a lot. So needless to say that it's an extremely, extremely high in demand tool in the job market today. We've talked about this in general. I think there's just basic visualization concepts, right? So aggregating data, visualizing data, sharing data, which is the Power BI service component, and analyzing data, which is again, so these three components are basically part of your reporting, and this is basically more on the administration part where you're sharing your data, setting user access, who you want to share with, create groups, create workspaces, and stuff like that. Who has permissions to edit your dashboard and stuff like that. So Sandeep, to answer your question, what is Cortana? Cortana is like, it's like a personal assistant. So you can ask some cool questions like, when do I have my next meeting? And Cortana will tell you when you have your next meeting. Okay, so it's just like Google Now, just like Apple Siri. So if you ask Apple Siri some kind of question, okay, I mean, how far is, yeah, got it, yeah. I'm sure you would have used Siri, at least I've heard of Siri. It's very similar to that. It's just Cortana is just Microsoft product. It's not as popular as some of the others, but then it's catching up, yeah. Different users of Power BI is something that we've talked about. Power BI is really targets all kinds of user groups. Components of Power BI, something that we briefly mentioned. This comes from the history of Power BI basically, where these are all Excel components: Power Query, Power Pivot, Power View, and Power Map. By the way, Power Query, I do want to mention one thing, that it's a very, very powerful language that it uses behind the scenes, and it's called the M query language. Okay, so M as in Mumbai, if we call it the M query language, that's all that they call it. There's no full form for it. Okay, and it's a very, very powerful query language that Microsoft has to query and transform a lot of these data sources. Okay, so you can actually do a lot of ETL using Power Query. You'll be surprised to know, and we were just now discussing a while back that the capabilities of ETL are very limited. Indeed, they are if you compare it with a top-end ETL tools in the market today, like Informatica, SSIS. The capabilities are indeed limited, but then when you use things like Power Query, you get a lot of stuff. I mean, you can actually do a lot of coding, and literally nothing is out of reach. So in that way, it is still a pretty good ETL tool. Okay. Power BI service, Power BI Q&A. Power BI Q&A is a very, very good feature. I'll show this to you again. So what happens is it uses natural language query, generate information about your data. So you can probably upload a data set into Power BI and you can ask questions like, what are my sales for the past 10 months? And Power BI will automatically give you a report. Just imagine how powerful and how machine learning is working there. Okay, so it can predict just by looking at your sentence. It knows what you're asking, and it will just churn out a dashboard just from a simple sentence. So if you just ask Power BI, give me the sum of sales, give me the sales over the past 10 years. Power BI knows that over the past 10 years is a line chart, so it's a trend. It will give you a line chart and automatically display that chart for you. So it's a very, very powerful feature. So we're going to look at some of those things in a while. Absolutely, absolutely, Dana. So Q&A is cool only if the data is modeled correctly. So which is a very, very important point also. So if your data modeling is not right, Q&A can go for a toss. Absolutely correct. Yep. So these are stuff we've talked about, real-time updates, so dashboards, popular SaaS solutions. SaaS means software as a service. So Power BI can actually connect to a lot of these kind of SaaS sources like Salesforce and stuff. I'm going to again show you all the different kind of sources that you can connect to. And these are real-time dashboard updates. So whenever, and this is again applicable only when it is connecting to SaaS sources or on any kind of cloud sources. So whenever data changes, it can automatically update. But then if it's an on-premise source, you will still need to go ahead and set up the data gateway. Data gateway is something we looked at a while back. Okay, and this is what we are mentioning here. So secure live connection to your data sources on premises and in the cloud. So it can connect to data on the cloud. It can also connect to data residing on premises like SQL Server database and stuff. Intuitive data exploration using natural language query. That's basically Q&A, and it does have a very close integration with Azure and stuff. Okay. Process in Power BI, we've basically talked about this in a brief way. So you look at your data, you do the ETL. ETL is basically performed using the Power Query, okay? And just going to show you what Power Query is in a while. And just to also give you a brief idea about Power BI desktop tool, which I'll just come back in a while, just to show you, just to open this up. And this is my Power BI desktop. I'll quickly fire this up. So just a while back, we were discussing about Power Query, Power Pivot, Power View, and Power Map. These were the Excel components, right? And we have evolved. We have evolved into Power BI, and that's how we talked that those were what existed a couple of years back, right? But Microsoft, what they did is they packaged all of that into the Power BI desktop tool. And now you no longer have something called a Power Query. You don't have something called a Power Pivot. Of course, they are there in Excel. You can still do that stuff in Excel, but they bundled all of that in Power BI desktop, and that's what they're marketed as a separate product. And this is what you get, is the Power BI desktop. The first page that you will see when you try to log in for the first time is what you will see. And you can click on Get Data. When you click on Get Data, you can see the wide variety of sources that are available here. Okay, so this is your Power BI desktop. The first view of your Power BI desktop, you can see there's this huge collection of sources you can connect to. The files, all the different kinds of files, databases, Azure, online services. These are some of the SaaS services that you have: Salesforce, Google Analytics, Facebook data. You know, you can basically, if you know your Facebook ID, just put in your credentials, and you can analyze your Facebook data. Twitter data is also there, and a lot of stuff you can do here. Okay, so Google Analytics, let's say you have a Facebook page and you want to analyze, you know, how many hits and stuff happened. So you can quickly build a dashboard out of that. Line charts, how many user hits happened yesterday, how many happened today. You can do a lot of cool analytics there. And one more very, very interesting thing that I'll show you in a while. This is very limited, so you can see the number of online services are still pretty limited here. So I'll show you from the service, from the Power BI service, you get a lot more options. So I'll just show that to you in a while. But this is from the desktop. You can get your data and you can still have access to so many services. The same stuff you can perform from the service also. You can click on Get Data, you can click on Services, and you can see a much more wider selection of things here. Okay, you can see these are all the different SaaS sources that I have out there. Okay, we call them content packs. These are called content packs. So when you see, when I click on Get Data, I see it's a content pack library. So these are pre-built dashboards which someone has developed for us. You know, so these are dashboards along with data sets that someone has configured for us, and all that we are doing is we're just connecting to that stuff. And I just want to show you. You can see there's so much. There's so much. So Power BI desktop, you're trying to do it from Power BI desktop. The options are limited. You still have some of the same information here, but then the options are pretty limited here. But then if you try to do it from the online service, you have a lot more different options. I wanted to give you a quick example just to, so far we've been discussing and talking, but then just wanted to show you something. Wanted to click on Bing and wanted to show you something really cool here. So Bing, when you click on Get Now, so what we did here was we went to services, and whatever you want, you can just click on Get Now. So let me go to Bing here real quick. On-demand analytics of internet search activity, really cool stuff. And maybe you want to look up something. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you might want to look up something. Maybe you want to look up Microsoft. You might want to know how many people search for Microsoft across the globe, and some really cool analytics can come up. Just click on, select Microsoft, anything, any search term that you want to include. Click on Add, and essentially this dashboard Microsoft has already developed for you, and all that you're going to see is pre-built dashboard being generated for you. Yep, so you can click on go to dashboard, and you can see that, you know, in a matter of seconds, you get a pre-built dashboard from Microsoft. It's really cool, the activity that you're seeing right now. Yeah, you can see the 20,000 hits literally by time. Okay, it's a dashboard that you're seeing, and I still haven't gotten the internals of the report and stuff. You can see that there's a high level view, how many hits happened last week over week change, 3.7% increase this week, top languages in which people have searched. Okay, obviously English is the majority, 69%. We call this a tree map. I'll talk about a few of these things in a while. We call this a tree map. Okay, you can see a news pane, which is directly querying data from the net. It's showing you its news items. And finally you have a map chart, a very beautiful map chart where the darker the color, the more the hits. Okay, the darker the color, the more the hits. So very clearly people from the United States and Europe have searched for Microsoft the most. Okay. Yep, so you can probably click on India, and you might want to know more about India, and just interactivity probably is disabled. Yep, so I mean, this way you can build a very quick dashboard here in Power BI. All right, so very simple to remove dashboards. You can simply go here, you can remove it, but then let me keep this for the time being, and let's quickly come back to and this is what I wanted to show you basically in Power BI, and just open up the desktop here, and you can see the three tabs mainly, the three components. So first is your data pane, second is your relationships pane, and the third is your report pane. And again, it might be a little confusing for all of you initially, especially if you're starting out, to understand what is a desktop, what is a service. I understand it might be a little confusing, but just remember that desktop is where you do your, heavy lifting. All your heavy development happens in your desktop. The service is where you're doing very lightweight development. Okay, a service still has amazing capabilities to develop reports. Okay, so if I just quickly show you, can still go to the service, you can still click on a dashboard, you can still click on edit report, and you can still build charts and graphs using this. Okay, so I'm in the service. Just imagine it's a cloud service. It's a SaaS, it's software as a service. So you can access your software, you can access certain things directly from the cloud without installing that in your desktop. But then the capabilities are very limited. Okay, if you want to do some more powerful modeling and stuff, you need to use the desktop tool, and which is where you have the data pane. And data pane is like your Power Query. This is where you are getting your query. You're doing the extraction. This is this is the extraction and transformation layer. Is the E and T of the ETL, extraction and transformation, where you're getting your data and you're transforming your data. And the relationships tab is like your Power Pivot. So this is your Power Pivot where you're modeling. So this is your modeling tab. Okay, and finally the reporting tab is the reports where you're developing visualizations, which are your Power View and Power Map. So that's where the components have been replaced by. Okay, so in Excel we had something called get and transform data, so which is again something that you might find in 2010 version. You had something called get and transform data, which we had in Excel, and which is what we call the data pane or queries window in Power BI. Relationships is what is Power Pivot, and reports is what was initially Power View and Power Map. That is how those add-ins have changed into the complete package Power BI desktop tool. Oh, great question, Sandeep. Can we have self-service ETL? Well, it's already there in the market. I don't know how many of you have heard about the tool called Alteryx. Alteryx is a very, very powerful ETL tool, by the way. I mean, just incredible in terms of its capabilities. And I don't think, from my understanding, from my experience, I don't think there's any competition to Alteryx in today's market right now. The adoption is very less. But then Alteryx is indeed an amazing tool. Yeah. I mean, I would definitely recommend you guys to, I mean, if you can learn it, wonderful. I mean, it's again a kind of ETL tool. ETL, when we hear of ETL and we hear of tools like Informatica, Ab Initio, you think of complex tools for which you need developers, but then when you use tools like Alteryx, you're just developing workflows. Yeah, you're just developing workflows where, you're just saying, all right, so just sort it. Just developing a workflow, you're saying sort, and it just does the sort by itself. I mean, it's just magical. It's just magical, the kind of stuff you can do in Alteryx. Yeah. All right, so as the next steps, guys, so we're going to have some quick demos right now. I'm going to take a quick couple of minutes pause, trying to set up my Power BI environment for us to get started with a few demos right now. I'm going to take a quick pause and we're going to get started with demos after that. Right, so ETL stands for extract, transform, and load. All right, ETL tool I spelled. We had Alteryx, so I spell it as ALTERYX. I'm going to go ahead and ping that across the chat window for all of you to kind of get a hang of that tool. Yeah, so I call it Alteryx. All right, so I do have a few questions right now where, I mean, folks are trying to understand if Power BI is an extension of Microsoft BI, MSBI. In a way, yes, yes and no, because it's not really MSBI. And when we talk about Microsoft BI, we really mean to say Microsoft BI is more from a very traditional platform. It's a very traditional stack of tools, which we call MSBI. You know, if you have heard of the terms SSIS, SSAS, SSRS, SQL Server Integration Services, SQL Server Analysis Services, and SQL Server Reporting Services, they are basically part of the MSBI stable. But then Power BI is a very different, it's part of the Microsoft stack, of course. I mean, it's part of the Microsoft stack of BI tools, but then it's not really an extension of MSBI. I won't really say that. It's not really an extension of MSBI by any means, because you have the 2016 version of SQL Server that got released a few months back. I don't know how many of you follow SQL Server deeply, but it's an amazing product. I mean, if you have seen SSRS, if you have worked in SQL Server reporting services before, the capabilities that SQL Server 2016, SSRS 2016 brings to the table are immense, are just amazing kind of stuff you can do. And if you know, Microsoft acquired DataZen a few years back, and a lot of capabilities of DataZen that have come into the SSRS product in the 2016 release. So in that way, they are separate products. I mean, please understand, SSRS, it's from a very different kind of mindset. It's tabular reporting. Okay, it's more like reporting from a very reporting standpoint, not from a very exploratory standpoint. But then when it comes to Power BI, that's where we come to data from a very exploratory standpoint. It's just analytics. That's what we call visualization. So they're two very fundamentally different schools of thought. Okay. All right. So coming to a few other things that I wanted to cover. All right, so that's my Power BI desktop file that I have opened just now. Power BI desktop I've opened at this moment. Hope you can all see my screen back. Screen to just to quickly go over it again. As my data tab, as my relationships tab, and as my report tab. And I have a few data sets that I have created here for you. I just wanted to show you a few things, and maybe later on, if you get some time, I'll touch upon it. And this is what I wanted to start off by saying how to easily import data into Power BI. So this is the GDP data that I have. You can see this is my country-wise, year-wise GDP data that I have. Yeah, very simple data set. It's a CSV file. Okay, and I can very easily import the data into Power BI. And how do I do that? And in a matter of seconds, literally in a matter of seconds, I can generate graphs and charts from it. Okay, so if you miss your initial window of get data, you can obviously always come here. You can get data. Click on that and it will take you to the same get data window. So it all will give you a list of all your sources. You can streamline based on file or whatever other stuff you want to connect to. So in this case, it's a text or CSV file. Yeah. So now when you do that, you can see GDP. It's trying to establish a connection to GDP, and you can see that CSV file. It tries to get the origin. It tries to set the delimiter. Okay, you can set a custom delimiter also. You can see that by default the delimiter is comma. Okay, if I try to set something else, you can see that the preview will not work correctly. You can see the delimiter is comma. So delimiter is what separates those columns. Okay, that's what I call a delimiter. So its delimiter is comma. It's a CSV file, and the data type detection basically means that essentially when it imports that data into Power BI, these will all be columns, right? Country, region, year, and GDP, they will all be columns. So Power BI will try to predict what is the correct data type for that column. So for here, for instance, it will be text, right? Here it will, for instance, be date. Here it will be a number. It will be a whole number or a decimal number. So Power BI will try to predict that based on the first 200 rows. So the more data you give, so if you say in the entire data set, the performance will get compromised. So that's why typically it depends, again, from a performance optimization standpoint, you can say, but then you can say on the entire data set, still evaluating the whole preview. It takes some more time, but then the CSV file has very limited number of rows, so you can probably do that. Okay, and then once you're done with that, you can click on edit. And when you click on edit, so at this time it's still at the query window. It's still the get data window, and the get data is still Power Query. And when you click on edit, you'll basically be taken into the Power Query interface. So it's very similar to the Power Query interface where, and you can see it opens up in a different window. You can see it's a query editor. Okay, so this is where we were initially. We clicked on get data, and this is where I am right now. When I click on edit query, this is where I land up. And you might be wondering, what is even a query in the first place? Every individual table every individual table, and when I say table, essentially it's a result set that you put into Power BI. It treats the table, and that's basically a separate query. We call it a query in Power BI or Power Query terms. Okay, so this is what a query. So you can see GDP is what I imported, and that becomes a separate query. Okay, so you can do a lot of stuff, and you can see so much of stuff you can do here. And this is the complete transformation layer. So we have done the extraction. Extraction was get data, and this is where the transformation layer. So you can do a lot of transformation stuff here. You can see that there's ABC. ABC means it's the default data type that is being taken. Okay, if you want to change it, you can just click on it. It's so easy. You can just click on it and you can change the data type. But it's done a fairly good job to guess. Okay, it should be ABC. This is also ABC. That's fine. I'll leave it as it is, right? So you can see this treated as a decimal number. This means a decimal number. If you want to treat it as a whole number, you can go back and convert it directly from here. Okay, so it's very easy. So you can see that I'm trying to change it, but let's just keep it as it is. Okay, so this is very simple. So you can rename your columns. You can right click on it. You can rename your columns. You can rename your stuff. You can say country name, or you can say country, whatever it is, whichever way you want to rename it. Probably the last column doesn't look pretty good, so I'll probably go ahead and rename it and just call it GDP. Okay, and very interesting, you will see here very interesting applied steps. Okay, you can obviously change the name of that whole query. Probably you can go ahead and set GDP underscore data. So you're changing the name of the whole query, and now it becomes GDP underscore data, or you might want to remove that underscore. You're calling it GDP data. And you see applied steps at every point in time. Whenever you perform any kind of changes in your query, that will be listed out as steps in your in the query editor interface. So these are steps. You can see the first step was source. Second step was use first row as headers. It's an option in Power BI. You have an option in Power BI to use first row as headers. You can do that, but then Power BI is intelligent and sharp enough to figure out that, okay, you know what, these are my header rows, so let me use them as header rows. So it'll automatically do that for you. It automatically applied this step for me. You changed your type. If you remember, I went here and changed my GDP to, I changed my type, and finally I rename my column. So at any point in time, if you want to remove a step, you can just come here. You can see the remove button. You can see here GDP I renamed a while back. That's the last step. If I want to cancel that step, if I want to undo, I can just click on it. I can click on delete, and you can see GDP becomes GDP underscore PP. Okay, I can come back here. I can rename it back, and you can see the new step will again be applied. So a lot of cool stuff you can do in that way. All right, so isn't that interesting? It's very interesting, I believe. So you can see that there's nothing much to do. I'll show you a few other complex examples where you really play around with your data and try to really do some more transformations on your data. It's a very simple example. Just wanted to give you a brief flavor at this moment. That's it. Your query is done. This is again the query section. You have edited your query. Okay, that's the Power Query section. And I talked about the M query language. If you want to add custom columns and stuff, you can of course add a custom column. And this is where you write the M query language. So when you say add custom column, you can see custom column formula, and this is where you really type in the M query language. So it's a completely different language, and you can do a lot of stuff. Typical stuff like if else, addition operators. A lot of those things are similar, but then a lot of other capabilities that you have here. Okay. All right, so once you're done here, you can come here, you can close and apply. You can close and apply. Please understand it's a separate query editor window that I have. It's not exactly Power BI text. It opens up as a separate window in addition to Power BI desktop. So I'll go ahead and close and apply my queries. So once that is done, it'll try to read in, try to incorporate those changes, pull in your data. It is only when you apply your query will it try to pull in your data. You can see this trying to pull in your data, and then this is my data tab. As I said, data is where you're trying to get your data. You're trying to edit your stuff. So this is your get data tab again. If you want to go back and try to edit your queries again, you always have the option to come up here again. You can see edit queries, and you can go back to that same query editor. You can make your changes here. Okay, close it. I don't want to make any changes. And I can come to the relationships tab. This is the other tab I mentioned. Relationships is your Power Pivot. There's no real relationships I'm creating here because it's just a single table I have here. So there's nothing much I'm doing in terms of relationships, and I'll slowly give you a few other examples where I'm going to show you how you can create relationships in Power BI. This is where it really, the Power BI desktop tool, it really becomes very important in terms of its capabilities, where you can do some very complex modeling. You can have 10, 15 tables, and you can relate them. You can do some very complex modeling here in Power BI desktop. And finally, you have the reports tab where you're basically going to create charts and graphs. Okay, so you can do something as simple as, and how do you create simple charts here? It's very easy. Creating visualizations in Power BI. That's basically that's one of the main USPs of Power BI. That's its visuals and how easy it is to create visuals in Power BI. Just to show you a few options, and just click on country. And if you click on country, it automatically knows that country is, it's just looking at that name of the column name, and it automatically predicts that, hey, country is geographical data. I'm not exactly saying it's geographical data, but it is geographical data. Just by looking at that column name, it's able to figure out that it's geographical data. Okay, there are ways in which you can obviously there are ways you can do it. Again, it's slightly advanced discussion where you can go ahead, you can change your types, you can go to modeling tab. You can see that data category, the things you can do here. You can to be more specific, and for Power BI to be more accurate in terms of data representation, you can always go back and set this data category tab to a country or a city or whatever you want it to be. Okay, and to be even more specific, even before coming to this step, you can probably go to the query section. Even before coming here, you can go to the edit query section, and now you can go back and say, this edit, this is a text, right? This is the text, but you might have scenarios where you have geographical columns, right? So in that case, you might want to go here and you might want to set your data types that way. All right, but then data category is indeed a very important thing where you might want to set it, right? So for country, you might want to come up here in the modeling tab, you might want to set the data category as country. So now it knows that that is indeed a country. So it doesn't make a lot of difference. Microsoft is still sharp enough to figure out countries, and it pretty much lists out the same way, but it does make some difference. And the other thing you will note is a small globe icon will come here by default. Okay, and of course when you click on GDP, it will just display the countries as it is, and when you click on GDP, it'll automatically try to incorporate the data here. And you can see some larger circles here, and you can see that what it basically means is that the bigger the circles, the more the GDP, and how neatly it has done the whole thing. You can set your colors, you can set a lot of different properties here. Yeah, you can see that right now the size, you can see that as and when I click on items, you can either click on items here, you can see automatically when I click on it, it knows that GDP I want to represent by size, so it automatically brought the GDP field here, but I could have just dragged and dropped it here. Okay, so it's very easy, very intuitive in terms of how you want to visualize your data. Okay, if you want to add some color components to it, you might want to bring GDP onto the color saturation field, and now in addition to be larger in size, you're making it color saturated. You can see now the bigger the circle, the bigger the bubble, and the darker the bubble, the more the value is. Okay, so you can set some pretty cool properties that way. There's so many options you have. From general map perspective, there's a lot of stuff you can set. Yeah, there's a color scale that you have. Of course, there's a diverging scale that you can set. So you can set a diverging scale where you start with a minimum of let's say a blue, and then you go to a center point of let's say your center point is something like a red, and finally let's say the higher the value, the greener it is. Let's say the lower the value, the redder it is, and let's say the middle point is a yellow, and you can get a pretty good representation here, which all countries have performed well. Okay, so you can do a lot of that kind of stuff, and you can see how easy it is to build a dashboard in Power BI. Okay, it's a very simple representation, and it automatically created this map. If you want to change this map to something else, if you want to change it to a table, just click on a table, and it'll bring up a table for you in a matter of seconds, right? You don't have to do anything, just click on it, and it'll automatically bring it up for you. If you want to change the data into a matrix, you want to represent it in a matrix, you might want to do that, and might want to put it in a matrix. Okay, matrix will really be more relevant if you put in something like probably something like a region. So it's trying to still taking some time to load. You can see the refresh bar comes up. It's taking still loading. Maybe I'll go ahead and delete it. Let's create a matrix again. So I'll probably take region, and this time I'll take country, and now I'll take GDP, and I'll put that as a matrix. And you can see now the representation changes. So for each region, I get data nicely aligned in a matrix format. It's different from a table. If you want to look at this data in a table, you can see this is how table data looks like. If you want to look at the same data as a tree map is again very suitable for hierarchical data. So the kind of data that you see here is what we call hierarchical data. So country belongs to a region, right? So one region has multiple countries. So if you click on a tree map, this is what we call a tree map. Just click on it, and magically you will see that there's a Central America and the Caribbean. These are all the countries there. And basically the larger the box, and you can also set a diverging color scale. There's different color scale that's being used here. So probably I can come here, I can set a diverging scale, data colors, and you can basically set it in color saturation. You might want to drag your GDP, and you can set a diverging scale. Let me drag and drop my GDP here, and you can set your values there. All right. Hope this is making sense. Hope you're able to understand the real capabilities. You can see that you can drag and drop. It's very simple to configure, drag and drop interface. Okay, and obviously there are a lot of other stuff you can do, a lot of other formatting changes you can do, and there's another tab for analytics. It's not available for all visuals. There are certain visuals for which you can perform analytics. Remember a while back I was saying that there are certain kinds of analytics, basic analytics you can perform, predictive analytics you can do in terms of linear regression and stuff, which you can do on the fly using Power BI, and this is a tab that you can use for it, analytics tab. It's not applicable for all visuals, but then there are definitely visuals for which you can apply it to. And of course you can apply your saturation. You can probably remove it. So let's say what I did here was I removed my country. So right now I only have the groups. Okay, you can probably add another group for country if you want to add one more group. So you can see I'm grouping by region, I'm grouping by country, and you know it's very interactive. You can either do it this way or you could have it in details. So the only reason behind having in details was that put it in details, it becomes more hierarchical. So inside Central Caribbean, you see the details. Okay, it's pretty intuitive how it's working overall. Okay, the other way of doing it is to remove from details and put it inside the group. So now they're both part of the group. And now what happens now is, of course, I can set this up as a color saturation. Color saturation means not only are you presenting the values based on the size of the box, so you can see bigger the box, more the value. You can see 1866353. It's a big value, so it's a darker color, and you can see it's a slightly lesser value, slightly lighter color, and it's a least value, so it's the lightest color in the smallest box. That's how a tree map represents data. And you will see a few other icons come up. These are drill downs. It can go to the next level of hierarchy. If you want to go down to the to the country level, you can do it like this. If you want to go down, if you want to expand down one level in the hierarchy, you can of course go down here. Okay, and this is how you can turn on drill down. And if you turn on drill down, and when you click on Central America and Caribbean, or when you click on North America, it will automatically bring up all the countries of North America, right? And you can just go up again, drill up, and when you click on South America, it will bring up all the countries of South America. And when you go up and you click on Central Caribbean, these are all the countries of Central Caribbean. And you can see that the diverging color scale remains the same across. You can turn on, turn off, drill down, turn on or turn off. You can have the focus mode. Click on the focus mode. You see the visual in a more focused manner, right? A few other cool, neat options that you have. You can export your data into files. You can export your data and you can put it in an Excel file and stuff like that, right? Go back to the report. All right. So that's basically what I wanted to highlight here. You can of course have simple bar charts. The most popular kinds of charts that we have. Simple bar charts you can configure, and instead of creating a new chart, obviously you can click on this and you can convert this to a bar chart. So all this information that we are seeing, using through a tree map, the same kind of stuff you can see using a bar chart. And again, you can see that it's grouped by a region and country. Just to keep things simple and not to confuse you anymore, let me just say region, and I can see a simple bar chart based on regions. Right? Data labels, if you want to turn it on, you can see the data labels come up. Formatting stuff you can change, and customizations are just incredible, the kind of stuff you can do here. You can of course have multiple columns here. You can of course have multiple items. So probably you can have one more. You can probably have a map chart. Probably have a map chart here. Let me just go ahead and select a country and its GDP, or maybe just put that as a year and a GDP. And the moment I do that, you'll see that automatically it generates a bar chart for me. Maybe the best way to represent this data is a line chart. I probably might want to go and set a line chart, and you can see that I get a line chart information based on GDP, and it's just so magical. It just does it automatically for me. In a matter of seconds, I get a line chart. So this is a line chart that is across all regions. No filters are applied. But what I really want to do is when I click on something here, I want the line chart to be automatically filtered, and you can see it's happening. So now I am seeing this only for Central America. When I click on North America, you can see the line chart. It filters by North America. When I click on South America, I see the trend of GDP for South America. You can see the GDP dropped. Is a sharp dip here. And you can do a lot of such analytics here. Okay. Of course, if you want to represent data, separately, you can of course do that. So probably so your axis is the region, right? Click on the line chart. You can see that you can obviously have a legend. You can have a separate legend, and you might want to do your comparison across legends, right? So here you see the 3 lines, and you click on Central America, it's the blue. Click on North America, it's the black. Click on South America, it's the red. So a lot of this kind of cool stuff you can perform. The interactivity is incredible, and you can of course have a map chart, the initial map chart that I created, and same kind of interactivity. You can have it laid out all in the same canvas. just arrange the sizes a bit, maybe just have more space for my map chart. Does a pretty neat job to organize stuff properly. And when I click on Central America, you can see that automatically it highlights to Central American places. It's not perfect because there are certain countries which are, and there are reasons why it appears here, because there are certain country names which are probably how it is North America. Click on this and automatically highlights that particular in the bar chart. All right, and you can see that when you click on this Barbados, you can see that Barbados accounts for 0.17 million out of the entire stack. It's a nice way to represent it. And here again, you can see that this is applicable only for Barbados. Right, makes sense. So when I click on this Chile, you can see that line chart now filters only for Chile and for South America. It's a pretty neat way of representing data. All right, so after I have done all of this stuff, and it's again a very basic demonstration I'm showing you, after I'm done with all of this stuff, I can absolutely go and publish this to the service, and this is where I develop this stuff here, and I can publish this stuff to the service. And the way I do that is I go to home, and I have the option for publishing to my dashboard. I can publish my dashboard. Do I want to save my changes? Absolutely yes. It asks me if I want to save my changes. To save it in a local PBIX file. So you can see the extension of a Power BI file is what we call .pbix. I'll probably call it demo_day1. That's my day one demo. Click on save. And once you save the local copy, and if I go back and show you, you can see that's the local copy that I saved here. It's a .pbix file. And now when I come back here, you can see it's publishing it to Power BI service. Right? It's a very, very simple workflow I wanted to show you. I have a few other demos and really cool demonstrations I wanted to show you on a few other capabilities. It's taking a bit of time. Success. So you can directly open that in the Power BI. Power BI means a Power BI service. You can directly open that, or I have it already opened. I can simply come here and it's automatically come up. So you can see the star icon marked beside demo 1. The star icon means that I've just recently, very recently, it's a new data set I have here. Okay, so I can just come up here and I can just open it up from here. I can of course go to my reports pane. So just like you have in the desktop tool, just like you have in the desktop tool where you have the data tab, relationships tab, and the reports tab. I just talked about it. In the Power BI service, you have mainly 3 components. You have data sets. Data sets is synonymous with your data tab. All the queries that you have, all the data sets that you have are imported here. Reports are basically the same reports that you build here. That's your reports. All the stuff that you build here are your reports. If you have multiple pages, and you can see this is a single page, you can of course build multiple pages. You can have one more page where, let's say, you want to build a horizontal bar chart or probably a stacked bar chart. You can of course do that. So we are going to build a stacked bar chart based on regions, years, and GDP. You can build that kind of stuff. Stacked bar chart. So you can do that kind of stuff also. Probably want to have region legend. All right, so you can have this kind of stuff also built out. So this is in a different page, and now if you can click on publish, the published version will be sent out to Power BI. So that will be taken as 2 different pages for the same report. So you can see that I only at page 1. You can delete a page like this. Yeah, you can delete a page, and this is page 1. This is the only page that I exported, and the same page that's going to come up here. Okay, that's the same page that shows up here. Very important to note that whenever you're using maps, you can see maps by default uses the Bing mapping service. So you need to make sure that you're connected to the internet. So if you're not connected to the internet, some of these capabilities will not be there. Okay, so you need to be connected to the internet for you to be able to use the Bing mapping service. That's a default mapping provider for Power BI Microsoft. Okay. All right, so I'm sure you already know Bing is a Microsoft search engine. Yeah. All right, so this is my reports, and the final thing that you really have is your dashboards. Okay, so I do have the Bing Microsoft dashboard that I have here. So I'll quickly go ahead and remove it. I don't really need it right now. I'll go ahead and remove it. I just wanted to take it as an example of the capabilities of Power BI. And really what you want to do is, and from your reports, you want to build what we call a dashboard. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to slowly start to pin items from your reports onto your dashboard, because what you share with your users are not reports. Reports are the individual chunks. Okay, reports are the individual chunks that you develop. It is the dashboards that you share with the users. So when you next time when you share a link with the user, that link will be for the dashboards, not the reports. Of course, they can navigate to the reports of the dashboard. They can navigate to the individual report pages, but then the stuff that you actually build and the stuff that you actually share are your dashboards. And the way to do that is very simple. You see an option for pin visual, and when you say pin visual, it will give you an option where you want to pin it. So I'm trying to pin this particular visual. Give me a small preview. I want to pin it to an existing dashboard. I don't have any. I can create a new dashboard and I can pin that particular visual. Okay, so probably I can say demo 1, that's my dashboard, and I can pin that particular visual, and you can see demo 1 dashboard is created. And if I go to that particular dashboard, and you can see that that dashboard tile is created. In dashboards, we call them as tiles. Okay, we call them as tiles in a dashboard. Okay, that's my pin visual. Simple enough. So you can similarly come back to the report, and if you want to pin one more visual, let's say I can pin this particular visual, and that's it. And this time it's an existing dashboard. Click on pin, and it is pinned. You can go to the dashboard, and you can see it's so simple, so neat. You can arrange the tiles. It's very easy to play around with, right? You get the same kind of. Let's come back to the dashboards again. A lot of default settings you can set. I mean, by default, whenever you click on a particular report on the dashboard, it takes you to the corresponding report. So you can see that right now. When I try to do some filtration stuff and all that, if I try to click on it, it will take me to that particular report. It will take me to the focus view of that particular report. So there's one more option that you can do. So I can go ahead and delete that particular dashboard. I can go ahead and remove it. Then we go ahead and delete it. And one more thing I can do here is I can come up here. I can go to my reports tab, and I can pin the live page. So the entire stuff I see here, I can pin that as it is. So I can pin the live page. And again, it's going to ask me, do I want to pin it in the new dashboard? Absolutely yes. And very, very important, you can see here, pin live page enables changes to reports to appear in the dashboard tile when the page is refreshed. So the auto refresh functionality is maintained. Whenever you make any kind of refresh on your reports, okay, so let's say I pin this to my dashboard and then I make some changes on my reports, and you can absolutely do that. You might be wondering that, okay, so all this thing I got by developing in the desktop tool and I published in the Power BI service, but you can actually edit your report in the service. You can actually come here, you can edit your report in the service. Okay, let's say you don't like the color, let's say you want a different color, you can actually come up here and you can actually change your data color. So you can come here, let's say you want to make it a red color, you like the red color, so you can do that kind of edit. So it's just like toggling between the reading view and the edit page view. Okay, so you can do a lot of this kind of stuff here. Okay, so maybe you want to change the colors here, or maybe you want to change this to a different chart. Okay, might want to change this to a tree map. So you actually come back here, you can change this to a tree map. Okay, want to visualize by group will be region, country, and GDP. All right, makes sense. Click on save. The report is saved, and I can go back. You can go back to your reading view. Of course, you have the option to go back to the reading view. So this is the default view that you have, and this is how you go back to the edit report view. Click on edit report to take you to that particular edit report view where you see the same kind of visualizations and fields pane which you were seeing in the desktop view. It's very intuitive. The tool is very, very intuitive. And as I was saying, you can pin the live page, and it'll pin the live page to the dashboard. You can say demo 1, that's your dashboard. And you can pin live, and what will happen is it'll go to the dashboard. You can go to the dashboard. Now you're seeing in the dashboard, you can see the page as it is. So it's just the same stuff that's been carried out here. So interactivity and everything is maintained here. It's another great way to maintain interactivity. So otherwise, normally when you pin individual visuals, sometimes that interactivity is lost. So it's a great way to maintain that interactivity in the individual visuals. So right now you can see that I'm doing it directly in my dashboard. Okay, in dashboard everything is a tile. So you can see by default this is what we call a tile. So these are all individual tiles, and you can add new tiles. So in your dashboard you can add new tiles, and tiles can be literally anything. It can be an image, it can be a text box, you can go to a text box, you can type in next, you can put a simple title. This is my first report. You can display your title and subtitle, probably say, and a lot of this stuff you can do. You can put some links, hyperlinks and stuff like that. You can click on apply, and now you can move this tile up. You might want to just apply some neat formatting, just change the size and all that, and you can do a lot of that kind of stuff here. You can just arrange the sizing a bit. All right, so a lot of that kind of stuff you can do. You can obviously you can of course change that. You can change the layouts. You can change the you can add new tiles, and you can see new tiles. You can add some web content. Probably you have some YouTube videos. Web content, basically you can give some URLs. Okay, so you can embed your code. You can give some URLs, and you can see the custom link. So you can set custom link. You can give your URL. Let's say if you want to play a YouTube video. If you remember in Bing, we had that section where essentially we had a news section, right? So you might be wondering from where it was taking that news section, right? And that's exactly, it was taking that news section from that tile page. So it's added a new tile there. So you can of course go and add in links. Very easy to do. Just a while, as I was saying, so you can type in a new link. All right, so pretty simple overall how to configure the stuff here in the overall service, and just wanted to show you a few other neat demos. So It's easy to remove the dashboards. So you can go ahead and remove it. As I just showed you, you can go ahead and delete your dashboards. And one other very, very neat feature that I wanted to show you, and all this while we were creating this report from scratch. So we went to the desktop, we created the report from scratch, we uploaded to the service. We had to figure out what kind of charts to use, what kind of graphs to use. We had to do that stuff all from scratch. Instead of doing that, Power BI gives you a very neat feature of quick insights. And once you upload your data set here, you can click on the data set and you have an option to do quick insights. Okay, of course you have scheduled refreshes, so it's not a very complex discussion. I don't want to get into it, but you can do a lot of data set refreshes, scheduling here, the data gateway that I mentioned. You can do a lot of that kind of stuff. But then quick insights, the really interesting thing that I wanted to show you. So if you know nothing about reporting, if you know nothing about visualizations, you can still come here. You can let Power BI figure out through its machine learning algorithms what is the best kind of charts and graphs to use. Click on view insights. The insights are ready. It usually takes time, but here it's taking very less time because it's a very small data set, and you can see that it does a fairly neat job of showing you a lot of different charts and graphs that you might want to see. Yeah, you can see GDP for Paraguay shows several trends. Okay, it's trying to identify the ups and downs, the highs and lows, and it says Paraguay has seen major fluctuations in GDP. Just might get some idea about this. If you know nothing about your data, let's say from a very different domain, it's from a different language, you know nothing about it, I think Quick Insights does a great job of applying some internal algorithms and trying to figure out. You can see GDP is trending upwards for Colombia, and a lot of it also is linked to the, so to say, the natural language query. All right, so you guys enjoying it? I'm not hearing from anyone. So I do have a few questions on that. I'll take that up in a while, but is this interesting to you? I mean, how are you guys feeling about Power BI? And I'm sorry if I'm really stretching the session. I think probably we'll have another 15-20 minutes more, 15-20 minutes more, and we're going to wrap up the session in a while. Do you guys enjoying it? Yeah. All right, it's very intuitive indeed. It's absolutely very interesting, and I can assure you will love it. Data is something you should all learn to play with, and in the world of BI, in the world of analytics, it is less of coding and it's more of thinking. I mean, you got to think. I'm not saying that being a coder you don't have to think. Of course you got to think. Everyone has to think, but then it's more of understanding how to represent data. It's understanding how best your data will feel. So there's a very intuitive feel to it. There's a very aesthetic feel to it. You got to know what looks good. You got to know what really looks good. So I wanted to show you one other quick thing, and again, just wanted to briefly come back here, and this is the same thing that I did here. I have a dashboard, okay, and the natural language query, the Q&A section, which some of us are mentioning. Okay, so if you just type in here, ask a question about your data, it's another brilliant feature of Power BI. Okay, it's a brilliant feature. It's something that really differentiates Power BI from the rest of the tools in the market today. The natural language feature. You can just query your data set using English language. If you have your dashboard up there, and if the business person is trying to view that dashboard, he knows nothing about your data, you can actually come back here. You can start typing things. If you just click on it, it'll give you a set of options here. What all stuff you might want to search, and I can have simple things like sum of sales by, let's say, GDP. Okay. It'll give me an option. It'll give me an option of here. Let's say sum of sales by GDP. Makes no sense. Probably I'll say sum of GDP by country. I don't have any sales. Maybe sum of GDP by country. I'll do a pretty neat job of figuring out how I want to represent my data. You can see how cool it is. Just by typing in your stuff, I can do a lot of crazy things. You can see as a table. Just say as a table. It'll show you as a table. I mean, it's just incredible, and just kind of power that it has is just incredible. As a tree map, it just gives you as a tree map. You want to use it as a pie chart, you want to give you as a pie chart. It's not the best way to represent as a pie chart. It's a different thing, but probably in that case, you want to represent it as a region. The region as a pie chart will still be good. And just typing English sentences, right? Just English sentences are being converted into charts and graphs. You can see how magical it is. Oh yes, it's not automatic. The initial settings are automatic, but there are a lot of things you can configure around it. Yep. One of you did mention in the beginning of the session that I need to do your modeling properly. Your data has to be modeled properly for you to, apply some of these semantics. Yeah. So obviously, I'm able to query this because I know it is GDP. I know it is region. But just as an example, I don't want to get too much into it. Just as an example, if I had renamed this column as something else, if instead of region this column name was something like capital R, capital R could be anything. I just a region, but then instead of region I just use an abbreviation for that. Power BI will not be able to recognize it. In that case, I'll have to say sum of GDP by capital R. and it makes no sense, right? So you got to know, you got to give your columns proper names, proper semantics have to be there, and I mean it'll do a fairly good job to guide you through what that particular column will be. But then in general, you got to make sure that you model your data properly. Okay, so you can obviously say trend of GDP by region. You might want to say a line chart and do a lot of crazy stuff here. Okay, and you can see how magical it is. Maybe you want to say by year, and it's going to show you a line chart by year. Right, so that's natural language query for you. So place your typing is automatically appearing, or do you need to do something for it? It is automatic. It is absolutely automatic, but you can disable it. There is a way to disable the natural language query feature, but it is automatic. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so the default settings are automatic. If you want to disable it, obviously you got to go to the dashboard settings. I got a lot of stuff here. You just have to quickly, just because you asked the question, I just wanted to take it up. You can go to the dashboard section. Just click on click on settings, and you see this window. And here you get to show the Q&A search box on this dashboard. You can just go ahead and disable it. You want to learn more about it? Click on it. And just guide you through the semantics and how to configure it to the data modeling. Turn on tile flow is a beautiful way in which you can arrange your stuff in the dashboard. So a lot of dashboard settings that you can perform here. Data sets, the refresh options you can perform here. Gateway connections and all that stuff you can perform here. Alerts, subscriptions, and all of these things you can do. And these are some of the developer settings that you have. All right, so that's it. I mean, I think we're pretty much good with this particular example. Yeah. All right, so I'll go ahead and show you something cool again. I think the part here is pretty simple where you configure the visuals. I'm going to show you another quick example. I think by now we are fairly familiar with the basics of Power BI. In fact, quickly go back and show you a few other examples. Go ahead and import one more data set. You can remove your queries. You can of course go to edit queries, and it's very simple to remove your queries. So you can come here. You can of course delete your queries. I can delete my query. You can see I just now deleted my query. I can go ahead and save and close and apply, and when I do that, I can see that automatically the relationships and everything else is gone. So you can so obviously the reports will still be visible because they cannot find the corresponding fields. I can go ahead and remove them. Want to get data? Go to Excel. Let me get something else now. Let me take relationships, and let me show you real quick how to configure relationships. So this Excel sheet has three tables, three sheets I should rather say. So you can go to the relationships Excel workbook. You'll see that there are three sheets that I have. Okay, and just to do some basic data analytics right now, just to show you what it means and how you configure this kind of stuff. You can see that as a customers table where you have a state column. Okay, the state column is basically an abbreviation. Okay, so this is basically different requests raised on certain days. You have a latitude and longitude column, which is a little different this time. Okay, we're going to show as this typical geographical data. I'm going to show how it represented using a map. Okay, but then the idea here is to how to relate these three sheets. You have states and territories. You can see the state abbreviations and state names which are linked to territories. Again, these are territory abbreviations and which are directly linked to territory names. So you can get an intuitive understanding that these tables are joined, right? So you have customers which is joined to states using the state abbreviation, and then the territory which is joined to territories using the again the territory abbreviation. It's very easy to configure that in Power BI. Okay, you can just select these tables, click on edit, and once you do that, it will obviously open up the edit queries interface. So edit queries, there are a few things we need to do, few transformations we need to perform. One of the first things we have to do here is you will see that go to territories. You will see that customers, it has done a pretty neat job of using the first name as headers. But then if I go down to states, I need to promote the first row to headers. You can see it's taking column 1, column 2 as default. So come here, use first row as headers. Come to territories, use first row as headers. And now you can see that things look better. Okay, I can give some IDs. So probably come here and rename it, call it territory ID, just to use proper naming conventions. I use territory ID, and territory name is as it is. Come to states, probably come to rename and call this territory ID. Come to customer, and even in the states, I'll probably name this state ID instead of abbreviation. I'll call this state ID. Maybe I'll just call it state name. I'll just call it state. And finally, I'll go to customers and call this state ID. And I hope you get the idea. What we're eventually going to do is we're going to try to form relationships. So other things are pretty straightforward. You have the ID column. If you don't want the ID column, which is pretty useless right now, I can go ahead and remove that particular column. Okay, so you have phone numbers which are as they are configured ABC, right? So other things, it does a very neat job of configuring stuff the way it should be. One thing I need to change, of course, is the zip code. You will see zip code is taken as a number. 123 is a whole number. 123 is a whole number, which is how it should not be treated. Okay, so it sees these are all numbers, and Power BI is not so intelligent. Of course, it is intelligent, but it's not so intelligent. But then I got to tell Power BI that, hey, you know what, zip code, it's not something you can aggregate. You can't sum zip codes, you can't subtract zip codes. It's still a text, right? It's still a text, it's still a categorical data. And when you do that, it's ABC, and it immediately moves it to the left-hand side. Now it's treated as categorical data. All right. So these are a few things that you got to do, and other things are fine. You can see that required date by default is a date type. You have a date time type also, and a lot of different neat features that you have here. Other things are okay. You can of course apply filters. You have an option to apply filters if you want to look at only data, and these are very Excel-like features. You can sort your data, and whatever you do, all that will be applied in the steps. If you want to sort it ascending, you can see that sorted rows is applied in ascending order here. You want to delete it, go ahead and delete it. You want to filter rows, you can go ahead and filter your rows. They're very straightforward options that you have. All right, let's take a quick look at states. Setting states are looking good, and finally you're looking at territories. Again, ABC looking good, and that's it. My queries are looking good. I'll go ahead and close and apply, and now my data part is fixed. All right, my queries part is fixed, and now what I got to do is go to the relationships tab and fix my relationships. It's taking a few time to little bit of time detecting relationships. So go here. Now I'm in the relationships pane, and you can see it has automatically formed relationships. I did nothing. And this is where Power BI, is really intelligent. It figures out. It looks at columns with similar names. Similar types, similar datas, and it automatically creates these relationships. You can see it's a one to many. The star stands for many, and the one stands for the one to many, right? So one state here relates to multiple state IDs here, and it's pretty intuitive, isn't it? One territory ID here relates to multiple territory IDs here, and you can just double click on it, and you can look at the kind of relationship with this format. It's very easy to create relationships. It's almost magical the way the interface is. You can see the state ID. You want something else, you can select it, right? Of course, I'll cancel it. I won't select both. Cross filter, it's a concept I don't want to get into. It's a complex concept. It's slightly complicated. It's slightly difficult to digest. But probably from a typical fact table standpoint, we typically set it to both. Okay, it's an active relationship. Again, there are a few other internals theory related to this, which I don't want to get into. But then there's a cross filter option that you also get here. Okay. And that's it. My relationships are set. I can go ahead and I can go to my report, and I can start building reports. So all of a sudden, I had 3 completely independent data sets, but then all of a sudden I've got a way to link them. So if I take a table, or if I take a matrix, or if I take whatever, I mean, if I take anything for that matter, I can all of a sudden use data from 3 different tables. You can see from one table, from the other table I take state, and from the other table I take territory, and this is working. If I did not have that relationship, this will not work. This will not work if I did not have the relationships defined. Very, very important concept, all right? And of course, you can do some other cool stuff. You have the latitude and longitude data. You can directly click on that, and you can see I get a map chart. You see I get a map chart immediately, right? You want to configure this based on your request types, okay, how many requests you were getting. So maybe you want to have an ID column. I know I removed the ID column. You might want to have an ID column. You could have kept it. You could have done a count, but then just a way for you to represent the cities. You can still take the city, you can still take the state. You can go back here, go back to your model. You have the city. City, of course, is city, and state. Go to states. State is, of course, your state. Probably I'll call it country or region. Sorry, state or province. And finally, I'll come to my territories, where territory is basically going to be my. Right. So this is not my category for this, but then probably. Right, so mainly it's my state and country which I'm concerned about. Come back here, and now when I click on city, you can see first thing the globe icons come up, and when I click on state and when I click on city, now there will be no more problems in identifying which state that particular city belongs in. Okay, so otherwise there might be conflicts. You might have a particular city which is in a different state and that kind of stuff. All right, so that's another example I wanted to show you, and probably the final kind of data churning example I wanted to show you here is, let me go ahead and remove these. There's a relationships tab I want to show you, and this is by far the most important thing, right? It's nice to play around with visuals. It's the easy part, right? The easy part is to play around with visuals, but then the complex part is really to come back and model this thing. That's really the heart of what you're going to do. So come back here. I can remove this stuff from here. I can go ahead and delete them. Okay, I can delete my customers. Probably I can go to edit queries, delete the queries itself. Let's take in a new query. Again, you might have observed that I had 3 Excel sheets. I had 3 Excel sheets and all 3 of them were taken as 3 separate queries. Okay, hope you observed that particular part. I can go ahead and remove my queries here, close and apply, and you can change your visuals, and they're gone. All right, so come back here, and the final thing I want to show you is straightforward. So essentially what I wanted to show you here is how to merge queries. Okay, anyway, so since I've opened this, let me show this to you also. So these are again some intricate transformations that you can do in SSI in Power BI. Okay, so you can come back and connect to an Excel, connect to custom columns essentially, and you have 7 different kinds of 7 different regions from which this data is coming from, right? So all I want to do is I want to merge all these queries. If you look at Oceania, South America, they all follow the same standard, right? I can go back and edit it. So now they are all individual queries. So they're all individual queries now. Look at Africa. It's flag, name, capital, status. Flag, name, capital, status. Flag, name, capital, status. So they're all the same kind of stuff. And what I'm essentially trying to do here is a SQL union all. It's very similar to a SQL union all, where essentially I'm doing a union all of all the data. So all the 7 continents, data for all the 7 continents have to be stored in a single query. So the way to do that is what we call append query. So the merge queries is like a join, merge is for a join, and append is for a union all. So this is the union all that we can do. We can append queries as new, so we can form a new query out of this that we can have 3 or more tables, of course. And what are the tables I'm going to include? Africa, Antarctica, Asia, Europe, North America, and South America. Click on OK, and you can see that now it's going to append a new query, which we are calling append1. You can of course name it. I can probably call it continent consolidated. And you can see it's so easy to do this kind of stuff. And all that we are doing is we are doing a lot of complex ETL right now. Not exactly complex from that point of view, but to do the same thing in an ETL tool, like even an SSI is, you have to do a lot of steps. You have to do something like you have to do a union all transformation, right? So it's pretty complex that way, but then it's so neat, so intuitive in Power BI. It's content consolidated, and content consolidated, you can see Africa 59 rows, 4 rows, 59 rows, and if you go to content consolidated, you can see there are 269 rows. So indeed all the rows have been added. You can see, yeah, makes sense. So that's what I wanted to show you in this particular example. And finally, the other thing that I wanted to display here is, and you can see that if I try to delete this, it'll give an example that query cannot be deleted because it will be referenced by another query. So you cannot directly delete this query. So the referencing query has to be deleted first. What if columns are less? Good question. Again, the ones where you don't have the columns, it will be null values, blank values will be taken there. Yeah. Of course, I can remove this particular query, and then I can remove the remaining queries. And the final thing I wanted to show you is another concept, a very neat thing that you can do in Power BI. If you try to do the same thing using some other kind of ETL tool, it'll probably take you a long time. I'm sure you're figuring out what this data is. It's this typical example of pivoted data. It's pivoted data where you can see that state names are listed out in the left-hand side. There's a lot of US states that I have, and you have the and you might be wondering where I'm getting these kind of data sets. It's a very common source of data for you to play around is gapminder.org. Excellent source of having this kind of data sets. Gapminder. Of course, you have the data.gov US government website where you get all public data sets. Okay. So you can do a lot of cool stuff using that, and you can see that it is pivoted data, and using Power BI I can unpivot it very easily. Okay, so I can go to Power BI desktop again, go ahead and cancel this part, come back here, go back to my get data, take Excel, and all this while I've been showing Excel, but you can of course connect to databases also, state population, US population table, edit it, you get the query editor window that opens up. And what I wanted to show you here is a neat way in which you can unpivot your data. And all you have to do is just select these columns from which you can unpivot. This is fine. The first 2 columns are fine. That's your state name, that's your year name, and I want to unpivot these columns. And all you have to do is just select these columns. You can see this is one more column I have here. If you want to move your columns, it's very easy. Just move your columns here. Want to move your key column right to the beginning. You can just move your column here, and your key columns comes in the beginning. Okay. Very simple, very easy to configure this kind of stuff. Okay, so that's your key column, and coming back to the pivoting again. So you want to start from this column, and you go right up to this column, and you want to do unpivot. So just right click on it and say unpivot columns, and magically it will unpivot your data. Okay. All right, so it did not really give us the intended result. I hope you observed what happened here, and I just wanted to keep it for you. I wanted to give you a small surprise here, and I hope you understand what happened here. It's not the best kind of thing that happened here. I hope you any idea what happened here? You can see that it's taking as column 3. It's not the best thing that happened. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and reverse the step. I'm going to go back and click on the cross. And now what I'm going to do is actually the reason why it happened is because you can see the first rows are not really column names. I'll go back and elevate my first row as headers. And now when I do this, now I can actually come back here, and now my unpivot is going to work. So check your data types once. These are all decimal numbers. You can see these are the just taken as ABC, and finally this. Okay. Unpivot your columns, and you can see a much more neater representation. You can see these are the years. So I can come back here and come back and rename your column, call it year, and this is your value, which is your population. So the same thing that you would have taken probably, I mean, I'm sure you will know, folks who know SQL, you will know that in the SQL query language, you have a separate syntax for pivoting and unpivoting. It's a complex syntax. You know, even if you try to do this in SSIS or any other ETL tool, it takes a lot of time. You know, it takes time to configure pivot and unpivot, but then it's magically simple in Power BI. If you want to remove some columns, go ahead and remove your columns. Want to remove your columns here, and that's your population data. And once you have this stuff, it's very simple to, you can see all these steps that I've applied here. It's very easy to go back and save this and generate visualizations out of this. Go to the reports pane, click on the name, that's the state name. I can see that right now when I click on the name, it's taking as a table because it doesn't know whether name means a state. Probably what I need to do is come back to name, try to rename this column. Okay, I'll try to rename this column here. I'll call it state, and the category is basically, go to the modeling tab, the category is essentially called state, right? So I'll call this a state, a province, and now when I come to reports, when I click on state, you see that it represents in the form of a map. All right, so these are all US states. This is a filled map. I have an option to give a filled map, which is much cooler. You know, it looks better especially if I have state data. A filled map looks much better because, you know, it gives me all the US states listed like this. And now if I take population here, data has a much better feel. You can come to color saturation, and essentially you get the larger the population, you can see the better the color. So essentially it's the same number that I'm having here, so it doesn't make a lot of difference. Come data colors and put diverging on, put the maximum as green. All right. So essentially the reason why this data is coming as it is because it's the same kind of population values everywhere. Not much difference, right? All right, so that's all that I wanted to cover today. Again, there's one final thing probably if I have to talk about a little bit here, and just to give you an idea, you do have the concept of slicers, you know, for filtering and stuff. You can put some slicers. Very easy way to put filtering. If you want to filter based on years, you can click. So these are my year slicers, and if I want to filter based on only 1840, so right now I can see only 1840 data. Let's just convert this back to probably a metric, so it will make more sense right now. You can see right now I'm seeing data only for 1840. If I want to select 1850, you can see I'm seeing data only for 1850. It's that simple to configure a slicer, or what we call a filter, in here, right? So it's very easy to do that. Of course, you have some neat little features for slicers. Instead of it's a vertical representation, you can obviously go here and you can go to selection controls and go to general. I'm sorry, you can go to general and you can set the orientation to horizontal, and data looks much cooler. Yeah, you can come back here, you can extend it up, and you just probably drag it a little bit to the side, and you can see how wonderful it looks. Yep, so that's your year data. You can see all the years are listed up here. Probably can have a map down here, and whatever you select here, that data gets filtered as it is. Might want to create a line chart out of it, year-wise data. So probably a line chart will be really more significant, and you want to represent year-wise population trends. All right, so and finally you have the R component where you can obviously write R script visuals. So people who are familiar with R, there's a very close integration between Power BI and R. You can of course click on R and you can see that you can write your R script. Okay, so you can write your R code. So things like correlation matrix, you know, heat map, some complex R visuals that you don't really have some visuals here. So you can directly go ahead and write an R script for that. And finally, there's another wonderful feature in Power BI where you can import a custom visual. Okay, so there's something called the custom visuals gallery. The link is app.powerbi.com visuals. So you have some a great community of developers who develop these kind of visuals in using the language. And essentially, what you can you can use these visuals as it is. But to just give an example, there's something called a play axis, dual KPIs, liquid gauge, any kind of visuals that you want to use, and really cool visuals you can use directly from here. Okay, very simple to use it. How do you import a visual? Very simple to do it. You can probably have probably click on play axis. Play axis, if you guys know, is something that you use scatter. So probably might want to take something like let me show you a cooler example here. This is something that I have found helpful at times where you have an attribute slicer, a really nice way of filtering data, and just wanted to show you. You see the brief description of the visual. You can download your visual. Of course, you agree. So your visual will be downloaded in your downloads folder, right? So once that is done, what you can do is you can obviously go to come here. You can import a custom visual, and now you can take your stuff from your downloads folder. Right, makes sense. So it's very similar to import a visual, very simple to import a visual into our Power BI. Okay, I can take my attribute slicer, and now you can see that the visual was successfully imported. Click on OK, and that's it. You can see that a small icon that has come up, attribute slicer. That's the same attribute slicer that got added. That's the attribute slicer that I added here. Yeah, makes sense. I'll go ahead and remove that R visual, not really required. Instead of that, let me take this attribute slicer. I'll click on this attribute slicer, and I want to slice this based on, let's say, state and population. And you can see that, I mean, you can see how magical it is. You can, of course, sort by state. You can sort it by state, and you can see, sorry, sort by population. I'm sorry, sort by population. You can see the states with the highest population are coming. So it is a slicer. It is still a slicer in the sense that, you can still use it to sort data. Let's say you want to look at trends of New York from 1790 to 1860. You can just click on it. But the best thing about this is you get to see a trend of how much a population was there for New York. So you can just click on it, and it'll still slice it based on Virginia. Now you're seeing data only for Virginia. Okay, you want North Carolina, you can see that now you're seeing data for Virginia and North Carolina. So it's very simple that way. And of course you can search it. You can type in values here. You can select Ohio and get data here only for Ohio. Click on enter, and that's it. You get data for Ohio and Virginia. It's very intuitive, and this is how you can import a lot of custom visuals from the custom visuals gallery. All right, that's it, guys. I think we had a long discussion overall in terms of the specifics here. Quickly come back to the decks just to review the decks again. Something that we have already talked about at length. The visualizations, the data sets, the reports, the dashboards, and the tiles. These are the building blocks of any Power BI solution that you have, right? All right, so that's it. I think we had a lengthy session today, and obviously it's time to bring a logical conclusion to the overall session. I did have a few questions around machine learning, and friends, my apologies. I think it's not really simple. I think we need to get into a few other concepts for that. Real-time streaming. Although it's very easy to configure, but then I just wanted to make sure that it's done in a more structured way. It's very easy to configure, but then there are still underlying concepts and underlying data sets that we need to build for that. All right, so. Does Power BI have online learning videos from Microsoft as Tableau has? Absolutely, yes, you do have it. So I did share that initial link with you, app.powerbi.com. So please go ahead and please look at some of the learning videos there. So even when you start up Power BI for the first time, and even when you start Power BI Desktop for the first time, you should be able to see, click on don't, and essentially when you try to start up Power BI Desktop for the first time, you get a link where it asks you to where it highlights learning videos and learning items. So Microsoft does have some pretty good learning materials from Power BI. Yep, it does take a bit of time to load initially. And essentially what we're trying to highlight here is the Edureka course that we have on Power BI. So we have a batch starting 15th of May. That's a new batch is starting. And I just wanted to give you guys a heads up in case you're interested in joining that particular batch. We are going to have a much more rigorous coverage. So this was just a preview. This was just an overview course. Just wanted to give you guys an idea as to what Power BI is and some of the capabilities of Power BI, and just to get you interested in Power BI. We had folks joining in from different backgrounds, different experiences, and hope all of you had enjoyed the session. Hope all of you, were able to relate it to other BI tools you would have worked in, or even if you have not worked in BI before, hope at least you were excited. You were able to get excited about the capabilities of Power BI. So what you see here are the course details, are something that we're going to cover in far more detail in our regular Power BI certification training course that we are starting from 15th of March. I would really encourage all of you to be a part of it. In case you're really interested to learn more about Power BI, I'd really encourage you guys to be a part of it, and let's meet again and let's learn together. Yep. There's DAX. You can see DAX, data analysis expressions. It's a completely different language altogether. Another very, very powerful part of Power BI. We're going to talk about SSRS reports also. There's a very close integration between Power BI and SSRS reports. There is Power BI embedded. We're going to talk about custom visuals, Q&A, some more complex concepts there. Administration, there's completely different discussion on administration that we are going to cover in our regular course. Okay. So that's it. It's great to have all of you here. I think you guys were great. I think you had some great questions that came in. Naidu had one question just to take up. How will the UI get refreshed automatically for real-time data changes? It does. I mean, if you're connecting to real-time streaming data, it does automatically get refreshed, and you can literally set the frequency. You can set the refresh frequency. I did not come to data refresh, but then you can set the data frequency to be very, very small also. So real time, absolutely it is possible. Yeah. So for streaming data, it is indeed real time. Yep. You might have seen the again, if you see here, this what I was mentioning. This is what I was mentioning before. When you start Power BI desktop, this is the screen that you get, initial learning screen that you get. And you can just click on it and you can get started with desktop, and it'll basically take you to the Microsoft link where essentially some of these learning videos are saved. All right. And you can see the option of streaming datasets here. Just to answer your question, I don't have any streaming datasets yet, but just to answer your question, it can connect to real-time data to your dashboard. So you can, of course, use streaming data. You can learn more about it. So more advanced concepts on it, you can absolutely go ahead and do that. So Naidu, just to answer your question, I hope you get a brief idea about it. You can probably go ahead and just look more, just research more into it. Yeah. All right. So do we have box plots in Power BI? Answer is no. You don't have box plots in Power BI. I'm sorry. So the only way to get box plots is you have to write an R code, and it's very easy to build a box plot, by the way. Yeah. So that's a good point, but you don't have box plots in Power BI. So the only plots that you have are what you see here, visualization. So additionally, you can go ahead and search. I'm not sure if they have added. So this gets refreshed. Oh, so you do have a box and whisker plot as a custom visual, by the way. Yeah. So Jan Pieter, so whoever this person is, I mean, it can be a person, it can be a company. I don't know. I mean, you can literally publish your own visuals. If you're good in coding, you can basically publish it by and Microsoft will review it and put it up in the custom visuals gallery. So you can go ahead and reuse it here, but then as a default, it doesn't have it. Yeah. Can we access files from Hadoop? Absolutely, yes. I mean, you name a source and Power BI has a connector to it. There's no source that Power BI cannot connect to. And I literally mean it. You can go to get data and you can see that there's literally no source that Power BI cannot connect to. So these are all the different SaaS sources. You have more apps, Office 365, web apps, you just name it. You can just search it. It's an infinite list of items that you have here. All right, so thank you guys. It was great having you here. Hope you enjoyed the session again. And as I said, 15th May, we are starting one more batch. We're going to have a more detailed discussion on Power BI. It's a formal certification training that we're going to have. It's a live class that we have in Edureka. Obviously, I'll be an instructor for that particular class. We do have 24/7 support. Some of you might have attended Edureka courses before, but then the idea is to just go ahead and straight. Oh, all right. 13th May is your first class, right? 13th May is a weekend, so essentially that's Saturday and Sunday. That Saturday and Sunday is where we're going to have starting the first batch. So 13th May is when we are starting the batch. So I'm sure the support team will get in touch with you. Again, it was great having all of you here. Hope you all enjoyed the session. Hopefully, I'll see you guys again on 13th May. Yep. Bye-bye. You have a good day, have a good night, and happy learning.